Yes.
All right, so we're starting from
Okay.
here. Go ahead. We're gonna talk today a little bit about, and let's try to use special words like T and S. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
What do
so we're
Oh,
gonna try to
so
debate.
T.
What's your position on this, and why do you believe it's the right thing?
Okay. So my position is that trans adults should. Okay.
Yes,
People.
please,
I guess
please.
T. Okay. T should have access to gender affirming care because in order to alleviate the symptoms of gender dysphoria, which can cause higher rates of depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. In order to alleviate those symptoms, allowing T people to have access to the gender affirming care will significantly improve their mental health and their well being,
Okay, so and you
including
nice. So
because
you have studies that show you that once a person goes into gender GA, we'll call it GA, gender affirming, GA's
okay,
care, they
okay,
actually benefit from it. They like, what's the stats
yeah,
on this? Can we look at that study? Can you link
yeah,
me?
yeah, okay,
Because I
uh,
actually want to look at this with my viewers here, and we want to look at
oh,
the study because I have my own studies that show me that the rates of, for example, self deletion, for example, in a video
mm,
game, actually stays either consistent or increases post T and GA care. So maybe you're arguing, what we can argue is it's going to be a little bit weird because
mm,
I might agree with you, for example, to give them therapy, if you can call that
mm,
GA care, but I would not agree with you to give them the hormones. I would not agree with you to
the
give
hormone
them.
therapy
You see what
and
I mean? I would
hormone
agree.
therapy.
Like, this is why
Yeah,
maybe I can't use GA care. Maybe we need to use
yeah,
something else because I agree with you
okay.
that we can give them the mental help, but I don't
Okay.
believe we
So
should give
like
them that
therapy and
medication.
like psychiatry. But okay, so you agree that they should have access to like therapy and psychiatrists and stuff to, but you don't agree with like them having access to like the medication like the puberty blockers and hormone replacement therapy or CRT therapy.
First of
That
all,
was
you
just
just agreed with me that we don't even agree that T youth should be a thing. You just agreed with me
huh?
that we shouldn't
Wait,
even agree
wait,
with it. So, and there's
wait, no,
laws
no,
right
I was trying to
now trying to
wait,
prohibit
wait, I
that.
was
So it really doesn't. So are you
wait,
trying to
what?
argue for it now? For like, so I thought what you're arguing is T for the adults, not
Huh?
the
Yeah,
youth.
try. Oh, yeah, trans people. Oh, transgender adults. Yes, transgender adults should have access
But
to the
what you're looking at right now, it's like
transgender
depression and
youth.
anxiety decrease for T youth, not
Yes,
for adults. So this
T
study is
youth.
showing that's thing we don't agree with. Like me and you, we don't agree with that, right? We don't agree that even though it shows that there is signs of depression, that we should still give them gender affirming care,
Yes,
unless the
I
problem is we
agree
have to
that if
define what that is. We have to define what that is because if it's just
with the gender.
mental help, like a psychiatrist, I agree with you. But the second you start telling me
Mhm.
we're going to start prescribing kids with medicines and some
Yeah, like
pharmaceuticals, I'm
puberty
going to
block.
completely disagree with you. I don't agree with that care. But if you tell me gender affirming care is actually just the psychiatrist talking to them and
Mhm.
helping them go through
It's,
the stages of life.
that's the gender family. The having the therapy is a part of the process of the gender family care because
Okay, but that's not the
the
only thing. So
yeah,
you are
yeah, no,
trying
no,
to
no,
add
that's just
things
what
to it,
I'm
right? So you add hormones to GA care, for
Yeah,
example.
puberty blocker, yes,
So I
because
cannot agree with
it's
that.
a
No, I can
part.
never agree with that. Not youth or the adults, to be
It's,
honest.
but not having access to that alleviate. Well, the whole point of why I want these people to have access to this
So
care is so that they won't
no
try
problem.
to unalive themselves.
I
And
know. So let's
the
dive
whole
into
point
deep
is
to your
to
studies. So I want to give you the opportunity. I'm gonna give you all. It's all your studies. We're gonna go through your
okay,
studies. Just link me anything you want, and we'll
okay,
go through and we'll read the studies and see the conclusions of these studies to see if actually it follows with your projected outcome, which we should give them GA to these youngins or adults
okay,
even.
okay, okay.
And because my understanding
Yeah,
is my studies that I can show you show me that the self deletion rates are consistent or actually increase. I can show you the huge rates of trying to detrans. I can show you
transition.
the huge regression videos, like a
Yeah.
facade
Oh,
of
okay. When you're
post
talking about
surgery regrets, like post traumatic
hmm,
like stress
well,
from the
those
surgery. It's the regret. because
So
when what
the
you're told when
regret.
you go into a surgery, nothing is
Uh,
guaranteed. So whenever you
yeah,
come
that is true.
out, there's a lot of regret because you didn't know what scar it looks is gonna look like. You didn't know what they just took from you. You didn't know if you're gonna live in a bag for the rest of your life. So there's a lot of regret that comes post surgery. So you're gonna have to try to argue that people are
Mhm,
happier post
mhm,
surgery, and I don't know how you can do that. I'm pretty sure people are
mhm,
happier in their normal natural state of being.
mhm. If they were happy, okay.
Am I
Let me see.
wrong?
Yeah, the thing about that is that they do not the gender dysphoria comes with not feeling. They don't feel as though that they are in the gender that they like they were born biologically. So they don't feel that they are who they feel that they don't feel as though that they are that person.
So
That's why we have to go through the process of getting that gender affirming care so then they have so then they feel that relief. But you're right. When it comes to it's not guaranteed. Yeah, of course it's not guaranteed. But the regret
but
is
you agree with me?
extremely
There's a lot of regret
rare.
that comes with it. Like, let's say that even
I,
if the thing is completely successful and he got a dick, he might regret the surgery scars. He might regret the post care necessary to keep it. You know, a lot of people have that. You know, like I had the surgery. I don't like the scar at all. I actually wish to my best knowledge if I could have found anything else except the surgery. What you're trying to argue is the first thing you want to argue is instead of giving them years, like maybe after 10 years of psychological therapy, I would agree with you. At this point, they have qualified, now they're ready,
yeah,
they've proven.
but yeah,
But I
that's what
don't
happened
think you
over the.
qualified it like that. The way you were trying to qualify is once somebody just identifies as in a certain thing and they've gotten a litmus test, maybe a 6 months hormone or a year of hormone, then now they can subjugate
No,
themselves to this surgery.
actually, allowing trans youth to have access to this care at a younger age prevents those surgeries or the further transitioning with also the care as well. And
So
like
what's
there has
but
to
the
be
gender
an
affirming care?
evaluation.
But you just
There
agreed
has to
with
be
me
an
that it includes
evaluation.
hormones. Is that what that includes?
Yeah, the gender
Or
affirming
is
care
it
also
just like a psychiatrist? Because I agree with you.
it's
That if
not
it's
it's
a
more than just
psychiatrist, I
psychiatry.
agree with you. But I think like is it hormone? Does
Psychiatry.
I think this gender affirming care is different than the adult affirming care. Like I think this is all it is a psychiatrist, and they're trying to
No, it's
conflate this with the other one, which is medication, psychiatrist, and surgery. You see what I
no,
mean? That's a
it's a
gender
mix.
affirming care, and then this is a gender affirming care. For the youth, it's just basically a psychiatrist, and maybe they give them retinol or whatever when they have ADHD.
Mm,
But for
it-
the adults, they give them other options like
mm.
surgery, hormonal
They
change.
are. Yeah, when it comes to transgender youth, like, there is therapy and there's
Send
also
me this link by the
medication.
way. Where is it? Send it in your chat.
Yeah, I sent you a link to the. We're talking about not very news. The medical health income. I sent it in just like the regular Discord chat. But yeah, but when I was talking about that, I was referring to how the reason why a lot of trans youth have the higher suicide rate. Suicide. What are we discussing? Is moral. Well, morally speaking, due to trans people having higher, unaliving themselves
Well, send me
thoughts.
the link.
Morally
Can you send me the
speaking,
link
oh yeah, here you go.
in
I'll
your
send you the
chat?
link.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry to
I'll
interrupt
send
you,
you the
but
link.
like I don't
Yeah, yeah, no,
know.
no,
I
it's
asked
okay.
you.
Sorry. There you go. I'll send it in my chat. This is the link that
All
I was
right, thank you.
referring to when it comes to like the higher suicidality rate, and that's the whole reason why I believe that
Where is
because
it?
when
Okay.
it alleviates because I don't want trans people to unalive themselves. That's why I want them to have access to that gender affirming care because it's healthcare. It's a form of medical treatment, just like just like how like a dude would get like a hand like hair transplant or whatever if they're balding, or how a woman would get like a boob job or something like that. It's just another form of gender affirming care that I believe people should have. Because I believe personally in just universal healthcare, but that's a different topic. And it's like everyone should have healthcare, and that shouldn't exclude trans people just because. But that's the link about the suicide ality rates to and how trans gender people have a higher rate to attempt unaliving themselves, and that's what in order to prevent that, then that's why we give these people puberty blockers and hormone replacement and this other gender affirming care such as psychiatry as well on top of that to reduce that to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future. You know. so then it doesn't get worse over time.
So I don't understand this. So right now,
Yep.
the youth are having a fucking catastrophe. I'm looking at the data right now. It says almost 25% of the LGBTQ students attempted S during the past year.
Mm,
Are you fucking
mm,
kidding me?
mm.
And according to this study, childrenshospital.org, this is fucking Children's Hospital. And your solution to this, instead of trying to figure out what the problem is, what the ailment, maybe
Mhm.
it's stresses of school, maybe it's
Yeah.
stresses of this, you
They-
immediately slap upon an S identity and then
no, but
mislabel their symptoms as, oh, they're just having distress because of gender dysphoria,
no.
instead of giving them any other option. Or do they have any other options besides transitioning? Like, what are the
Uh,
options that these kids have?
no, when it comes to the suicidality rate, it's not just the gender dysphoria, but it's gender dysphoria on top of other things such as like transphobia, with, and like the stigma towards having the
Okay.
stigma of receiving that treatment and the prejudice related to it, which all is stressors and causes problems. You know what I mean? So like when you're constantly being attacked as a trans person about your very existence, then of course you're gonna feel very stressful, and that and anxiety and depression will all build upon on top of each other when you're constantly going through that discrimination and marginalization because you're a part of such a small and powerless community. You know, and you don't have any support or anything, then of course those unaliving rates will increase over time. That's why the gender affirming care needs to be implemented. And when again medical professionals are involved and there is an evaluation over a long period of time to make sure that that this person who identify as something else uh, is diagnosed with a gender dysphoria. So it's not. I'm not just saying, oh, they feel this way and we should go straight into these procedures. No, it's a process that has to be done first in order for this stuff to happen. You know what I mean?
Okay, I'm reading a study. I'm going to link you the study right now. It says that
Okay.
there's a concerning
No
trend.
thoughts?
There's a concerning trend
Mm-hmm.
regarding this S in transgenders, suicide in individual.
Actually.
A high prevalence
Mm-hmm.
of S attempts and thoughts of S occur in T youth compared to their cis peers, which we just
Mm-hmm.
looked at 25%, which is
Yeah.
insane. You guys are having a
Mm-hmm.
fucking catastrophe. That's a
Mm-hmm.
catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
25% of the population is trying to end
Mm-hmm.
themselves. You are
And
having a catastrophe. You need
yeah,
immediate help. You
yeah,
need immediate, like there needs to be an
yeah,
immediate concern. Immediate. You see what I mean?
yeah,
25% of that population.
yeah,
This is insane. I couldn't believe it when I
yes,
read that.
exactly. Yeah,
So
and
first of
I
all,
agree.
so this agrees with you, but the idea is, I don't think it agrees with you with what you're proposing is the solution,
Mm-hmm.
because look what it says here. It says here,
Mm-hmm.
G affirming treatment remains a topic of controversy. Of particular concern is whether
Mm-hmm.
gender affirming treatment reduces suicidality. A narrative review
Yeah.
was undertaken evaluating suicide related outcomes following gender affirming surgery, hormones, and or puberty blockers. Of the
Mm-hmm.
23 studies that met the inclusion criteria, the majority
Mm-hmm.
indicated a reduction in suicidality following gender affirming care. So
Mm-hmm.
they actually agree with you.
Yeah.
However, look, this is where the study is very important.
Mm-hmm.
However, it found that there's an error. However, the literature to date suffers from a lack of methodological rigor. That means they
Mm-hmm.
they either lied. This is being nice word to
Wait,
say that they lied, or that they're incompetent. Methodological rigor that increases the risk of type 1 error, which is a type of error that you see. There's either a type 1 or type 2 error. It's either error of premise or error of conclusion. These are the errors that you could
mm-hmm.
possibly have in a study. So
Yeah.
there is no. So basically, they're saying this study is suffering from a type 1 error. So you can't accept this study that says that's post gender affirming care of puberty blockers and all of that. It's actually a good. It's actually reduces suicidality. Actually, they're gonna try to argue in this study that I just linked you. That's
Mm-hmm.
actually not true. They misrepresented the data. They say nicely methodological rigor, but that basically is saying that they lied or misrepresented data, or they're incompetent, basically. So the literature
Mm-hmm.
to date suffers from a lack of methodological rigor that increases the risk of type 1 error. This is the premise
Mm-hmm.
error. That means they made or maybe a conclusion error. I forget which one. There's a need of continued research in suicidality outcomes following gender affirming treatment
Mm-hmm.
that adequately controls for the presence of psychiatric comorbidity
Mm-hmm.
in treatment, substance use, and other suicide risk enhancing and reducing factors. So basically, they're trying to say they never put these factors that these kids might have
Mm-hmm.
already a preconceived
Predisposition to
notion, or
other.
they were around a certain environment or something. Basically, they're
Mm-hmm.
saying like the
Well,
most
those are all
basic
psychogenic.
things the study could
Yeah.
not even account for. So there is also a need for future systemic reviews given the inherent limitations of a narrative review. There may
Mm-hmm.
be implications on the informed consent process of gender affirming treatment given the current lack of
Mm-hmm.
methodological robustness of the literature review. So they're saying there
So the
may be
study is bad.
implications on the informed consent process. So that means
Mm-hmm.
post the study, we might create an implication saying that there
Mm-hmm.
might be new rules on how you would try to gender affirming treat
Mm-hmm.
somebody because we
Mm-hmm.
we might we actually don't trust the data anymore. That's literally what
Yeah.
the abstract of the study is, and it's
Jesus
going to try to
Christ.
argue throughout this whole study that actually there's either a consistent or an increase of suicidality. It never goes down.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, so that's just a really bad fucking study. Yeah, but there's more than just that study. And that was clearly with faulty evidence and faulty data.
Yeah, so my question to you is what do you provide
Mm-hmm.
these kids that are 25% of your population that are suffering? What do you provide them besides gender affirming care? Do you give them any extra money? Do you give them a reduction in homework? Do you give them an easier life or a harder life? What do you do for them
And
besides try
there's
to
more
put them
than
under medication and try to put them in a mental hospital? What do you give them? What do you offer to these kids? What kind of
help
programs
them.
do these LGBTQ kids have
There
that are
are
having a
programs.
crisis right now besides
Mm,
having to act like they're victims so they can get some
whoa,
some
whoa, whoa!
some care?
Acting like victims. Whoa, whoa!
I mean, the idea
There's
that
no
the
resource
only
on
way they can get any guy
many
to care
people.
about them is only after they try to attempt
Yeah,
suicide or to try
yeah.
and then you tell them, well, this your only solution is to cut off your penis and that
Whoa,
will
whoa!
make you happier. That's
That's not half.
insane to me.
That's
What did you
okay.
offer them? What is it
Okay,
being offered to these
that's
youth
not happening.
that are having
You're
such
not just
incredible
doing.
crises? This is a
You're,
crisis.
yes, this is a crisis, and you're doing the gender mutilation thing, which isn't happening to certain youth as adults. But also on top of that, the again due to lack of support, not having any therapy at all, it's like it's either you do absolutely nothing or they unalive themselves. Like,
Yeah, and you're only support to them. Literally, what you're saying, you either go talk to
mm,
somebody about how you're mental, that so they can give you drugs, or deal with it. That's literally all you got. You cannot reduce their life. You make their life better in any way. You don't give them any help besides this gender affirming care. Where's the other care? Where's the care? Where's the care for the kids that tried
okay,
suicide and they were just being bullied? Where's the care for the kids that are attempting suicide and
that's
they just hate, they have shit parents? Nobody gives a fuck about nobody except when it comes to the prescription drug
mm,
epidemic, so they
I
can
mean,
shove these down the throats of people, and because the kids are
also
good,
make money.
their parents pay really good.
Right. But that now let's get into the topic of like commodifying medication to make more
That's a
money
different
off of
topic. I
people
want you to
suffering
agree
from this
with
pain.
me
Yeah,
that what you're
yeah,
advocating for
no,
is kind of a little bit scary
no,
and hasn't been completely justified or tested completely,
yeah.
according to the
Yeah,
studies that me and you we had to look at, because we're very limited in knowledge. Me and you, we're not
mhm,
researchers or
yeah,
knowledgeable
no.
people.
And also, yeah. So, preface, I'm not a trans person, so I can't speak upon the entire trans gender community. So I don't have all
I'm
these.
just
And
asking
also,
you,
yeah,
do you
yeah,
agree with me? It might be something more important than just giving them gender affirming care. Maybe there's something more. Maybe you can support them in any other way. Like, where's the support for the kids that are getting
yeah.
bullied? I don't see people giving them. I don't see social time for the
Mhm.
bullier. I don't see any
No,
doctor
yeah,
therapy given to the bullied person. I don't see
no,
them
but
being
the thing of
advocated against. Like basically, they just tell them, "Hey, don't bully," and then they try to tell you to go tattletale on each other,
mhm.
but they don't actually
It's,
support the person is bullied. Where's the trainer that trains them to fight the
yeah, that's
bullier?
psychology.
Where's
But
anything
fighting,
like
but
that? There's
now,
nothing. There's no support. There's no care for anybody. And the only care you can give them is you
it's
wrongly
not.
give them you
Well,
systemically basically give them the wrong
mhm.
diagnosis, and then you give them the wrong treatment over
Mhm.
it too, which is a crazy treatment. Which the article I just sent you, the study I just sent you, is arguing that that's actually not increasing. It's not giving us the value that we want, which is reducing suicidality. It's actually making it worse because we're seeing people trying to detransition, and we're seeing a lot of regret, which is a new thing that we didn't have before. We didn't have before. Like people, yeah, they were depressed, but they didn't regret. Now they're having regret, which is a different thing.
there are some people who do
But do you
regret, but
agree with
that's
me that
a
regret
rare
is
case.
actually a
That is, but
symptom
isn't
of that transition?
yeah,
Like that's actually coming
mhm,
straight up from that transition. That means they are
mhm,
victims of the transition.
yeah. Again, you're hyper focusing on a small percentage of those who do who do
I
regret
would
the
say up,
transition of a much bigger percentage that
man.
don't.
Okay, let's look at the regret
You
studies. Can we
know.
look at the regret
Okay.
studies?
Yeah, we can work with regret studies.
Let's look at some regret
Yeah.
studies because that's gonna tell us a little bit. Like my contention here is probably gonna be my argument is you're probably gonna see a bigger rate of regret
Mm-hmm.
post than pre. Of course you will, because there's
I see
no
what you're
regret
saying.
pre. It doesn't exist. Do you understand me? Like there's no regret. There's depression pre, but there's no regret. It's always post is where the regret comes. I don't even need to look at the
Okay.
study. Just logically speaking, the regret, which is a new phenomena we're seeing, the
That's funny.
psychological
I don't
phenomena.
need empirical evidence. I'm just
Okay,
gonna
read
use
it.
my
You want to answer
feelings.
why doesn't anyone care, which is, to be honest, not unreasonable. Some proportion of people
Mm-hmm.
experience regret for any medical procedure. See what I'm talking to you about? When you go under the
Mm-hmm.
knife, it's extremely
Mm-hmm.
scary. You're not ever guaranteed to come out alive. To act like
Mm-hmm.
these guys are happier and they will never go through any complications or have any regret is a lie. You're lying. And so what happens is you're misrepresenting the
I
facts.
never said that people don't go
But
through.
you're
That's not
trying to
lying.
advocate that it reduces their S rates, and I'm trying to tell
Yeah.
you where there's no even the studies I'm looking at don't agree with you, and I don't know the studies you're looking at. I just proved to you a study that actually
Yeah. I
contends
sent
with your
the
study.
image. Where was it? Please.
So I'm saying to you that your conclusion is wrong. You cannot give them gender affirming and just say they're supposed to be happier.
Wait,
No,
I
there's
sent
more
hold on,
to it.
I sent the link into my chat of another study in which trans people sorry, excuse me. Trans people, like the mental health uh, outcomes of these like oh no yeah.
I can give
There's,
this
there's
upon
been,
any group. Increase stigma and
mm-hmm,
discrimination and decrease of social support. I can give this to any group. I can give this to the men. I can give this to the nerds. I can give this to the girls that have, quirks or weirdness or don't have teeth. I can give this to the Down syndrome kids. I can put this abstract that there's a disproportionate burden by poor mental health outcomes owing to decreased social support and increased stigma and discrimination. Basically, I can put that upon any youth group. Literally, I can find any youth group that follows this actual description here of what they believe is the issue that is the consequence is the not the issue but the reason like this is why because of this is why they are having mental health outcomes because there's reduced social support and an increased stigma and
okay.
discrimination. I can give that to any group. Anyways, moving on. Objective: to investigate changes in mental health over the first year of receiving gender affirming care. Let's look at only the first year. They won't look at any other years. Very interesting that they're very scoped down. By the way, this is a fallacy of study. It's very scary to me when you only look at a study and you make a serious study and you only look at 1 year. This is scary. Do you agree with me that there's a fallacy here that we cannot completely accept this as fact, your study here, because it's
Different
only
outcomes
one
of
year
three,
study?
6 and 12 months follow up. I don't agree that that's like this study. That's a year is a long time to be able to do an evaluation for this kind of process. Uh, I'm not entirely sure. Like it'll be something different if this is a process that only took like 2 weeks and they do
It's
an
just
entire study
interesting to
out.
me that they only looked at the first year and they didn't look at anything. So just be weary. That's all I'm
Like, are you talking
asking
about like
you.
background? You mean like looking at like at their background,
No,
like
no,
doing a
no. What I'm
background check on
telling
like
you
their
is
previously?
they could easily, if
Oh,
they're
are you
looking
saying
at
they didn't? They
2021.
could have
When did
extended.
this come out? This came out at 2022. So what year were they looking for? Let me see. Data were analyzed from August 2020 through November 2021. They could have looked at any data prior. They could have looked at any data post. They only chose 1 year, and from the months of August 2020 to November 2021, even though I think data was being collected a little bit sooner from 2015, 2017, possibly. But anyways, so
Mm-hmm.
that this is very scary. So do you at least recognize that 1 year is just not enough? We are going to look at it, but 1 year is not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Like this could be a
So you're
fallacy,
saying that
a study that could
it
not
could
be
be a
trusted.
fallacy? No. Again, that's a pretty long
Do you
time.
know
So
anything
you
about
so
studies? Do you go did you go to college?
yeah, I'm in college right now.
So
And studies
do you
do
know
take a
that
long
studies
time.
some studies have fallacies
You
like
take
sample
years.
fallacy, like a study that only has 50 participants is not something you should give upon
Mm.
the whole general population. Do you agree that?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I get that. Like
So
if it's
so do you agree with me that a
take longer
year
time.
is of data is not enough to give upon the basically the lifetime that the post transgender has to live? So this might be not a complete accurate representation. So any data we might see is not an accurate representation of five
So if I were
years,
to,
10
so if
years,
we were
20
to see a
years.
study that was, so if we were to see a
It's
study that was
actually a
conducted over
fallacy
the
for
course
you
of
to
5 years,
actually give
and,
that 1 year to the 5 years. It's actually a fallacy to
so
give
if
that
we
one
find
year to
another
the ten
study that's
years.
still supporting my claim that was over that took the where the data was compiled over the course of 5 years and still had the same results, then we
I
wouldn't
agree with you.
listen
I
to it.
agree with you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But
Mhm.
so do you understand with me that these are very new, very small data samples. It's very susceptible to errors. What I'm trying to say, I'm not arguing that my
Mhm.
studies are better. I'm just telling you when we look
Mhm.
at studies like that only have 1 year worth of data, we immediately have to be
So what would be
skeptical.
the threshold for you to be more susceptible of the
You
information? Is
have
it
to be
like what,
skeptical
one
because you
to
could
two
be
years,
committing
3 years,
a sample size fallacy, which
10
is
years?
basically to attribute the full, a general population on that little sample size. So you have to be
Okay.
very careful of committing a sample size fallacy
Mhm.
because you're looking at 1 year and you're trying to attribute that to the 10 year. You're trying to
Mhm.
attribute that same result to the 20 year.
Um,
And this is a
yeah.
fallacy what you're committing. Do you agree with that? Like we
No.
cannot do that. That's why we have to be skeptical. Do you agree? Like that's why we cannot attribute whatever this 1 year upon the 10 years. Do you agree? At least we can attribute the data from 1 year to five. Like we have to actually look at the 5 year data. It could be because what we're doing is if we just look at 1 year and then attribute that to 5, 10, 20, and just look at that, that's a fallacy. That's you're actually making a misjudgment of data because you don't have enough sample size. It's a sample size fallacy. Sample size usually can be sample length, sample time, stuff like that. Like it's a year only when we need, and but you're actually attributing post that year. Basically, what you're saying, oh, well, look, after a year, they're happier. I don't even have to look at the data. I'll give it to you. Let's say that after a year they're happier. It's a fallacy to attribute that to after 5 years. It's a fallacy to attribute
Mhm.
that to after 10 years because look at it, it's called a sample size fallacy. You don't have that
Mhm.
data, you're committing the fallacy of thought, and this is an inconsistency, it's a contradiction, and we should not be taking that seriously. Do you agree? Like, we should not be taking that as the arbiter of truth, that gender affirming care is the thing we should be doing.
Wow, that's crazy. Not looking at that, just not looking at empirical evidence. Okay, wow, that was a whirlwind of emotion right there. Still can't wrap my
Do you see
brain
where I'm
around
coming
it, but
from?
yeah, yeah, I understand where you're coming
So
from.
we
Yeah.
can look at it
Yeah.
and give it for 1 year, but we can't look at it and give it for five. We can't look at it and give it for 10. So actually, there might not even be data that supports your claim that there is gender affirming care. If the only study you can find are 1, 2 years, 3 years, that's
But what would be
actually
the
not
threshold for
enough.
you to be more conceptive of the data? Like, would it have to be a study that spans across 20 years in order for you to have like okay now
Basically,
I
like for
can
example,
consider it.
sample size fallacy. For example, it has to
Or if
be.
there's a larger
It's
sample size.
subjective. It's subjective. But for example, you wouldn't
Yeah, I
trust
mean,
anything less than 1,000. You wouldn't trust anything. Like if they say anything,
oh,
like
okay. So
let's
because the
say
sample size is so
yeah, so
small
that's
and
the
that it's
sample
such a
size.
small sample
So the
size.
length of time, for example, you can.
Mm-hmm.
So all I'm saying is, unless you have the data for 10,000, a
Mm-hmm.
thousand is not enough to represent the 10,000. You have to have the data for 10,000. So if you have the data for 10,000, then 10,000 cannot represent the 100,000. You need the data for 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, 100,000 can represent the whole population. A million can represent the whole population. At some point, it becomes a full, clear representation. But what I'm saying before that, it's you're committing fallacies when you attribute those onto the full population, the general population. It's called the sample size fallacy. You just don't have enough data to attribute that on a higher scale. But at some point you will, and usually it's between 1,000 to 10,000. It's enough sample size. I mean, if you could do anything at 1,000, any study that at 1,000 usually is acceptable completely by peers. if you can get 1,000 people to include, and that's why bigger studies that you see them, they try to get a lot of signs. It's important to get signs because you need that threshold of a sample size. You need a threshold of a number that shows you a general population. So when you show them like, oh look, I have 100,000, you can say, oh well, we can generalize now on the general population. But if you only show them 1,000 signatures and say, well, this is the whole population of America, this is a fallacy. And so that's all I'm saying is you misrepresent data when you look at things that are not enough. So if you're going to try to tell me, well, look, everyone is happier post-transition, but your only study is only 1 year, so we're committing here a fallacy because we don't know how if they're actually happy post 5 years. We don't know if they're happy 10 years, and we cannot attribute that based on a 1 year study because it's a sample size fallacy.
Okay. I'll be right back. I
Did you
understand where
look
you're
into
coming from.
it?
I
Did
still
you look
disagree.
into the sample
I'll
size
look into
fallacy?
sample size fallacy. I'll be right back. Sample size fallacy. But yeah,
I'm
okay.
looking at it right now. It's a failure to take account of sample size when estimating the probability of obtaining a particular value. So I'll give you an example. It gives you an example, the Oxford reference right here. A failure to take account of sample size. The research into the fallacy was first reported by Israeli psychologist Daniel Kammerman in an article in journal Cognitive Psychology in 1972, describing an experiment in which participants were asked to estimate the probability of a group of people having an average
Yeah.
height over 6 feet. The participants produced almost identical estimates for group size of 10, 100, and 1,000, whereas in reality the probability of an unusually high sample average relative to the population average is much greater. In a small sample, much greater in a small sample than in a large one. The fallacy is explained by the use of representative heuristic, which is insensitive to sample size. So the most common form of the fallacy is the tendency to assume the small samples should be representative of their parent population. So it's a fallacy to act like a year is enough to represent 10 years or 20 years post transition. The gambler's fallacy being a special case in the phenomenon compare base rate fallacy. This is another fallacy. But basically that's the description. Is what happened was when they gave them a sample, like basically gave them a sample size of 10, they immediately, when they were tested, turns out they actually attributed to the whole population that same sample size. When they gave them a sample size of 100, they gave that same attribution so basically they gave them a bell curve and they're like, what do you think? 10 people look like this, so what do you think the general population looks like? And they give the same bell curve almost. Then they gave it to the 100 and they gave them the same almost bell curve that they gave to the 100. And then they gave them with 1,000, they gave the same bell curve to 1,000. So they found out that sample size is important because what's happening is based on the data we're giving them, they're giving us back the representation that we gave them. So we have to instead give them a big sample size so because usually what you're doing is when you give somebody data, they're going to repeat it back to you exactly what you gave them. So what's happening is they're making fallacies of thought because all they have is 10 people's data, but they're attributing it to the complete population of the United States of America. And that's what usually happens, in low IQ people. So the guy's gonna act like he's not here. Yikes. All right. Well, I guess that's that. I don't know where the dude is. He's gone. I'm gonna stop by this dude, see if